Hello and welcome back to my channel. So the type we're talking about today is the ISTJ, Introverted Sensing, Thinking, and Judging. This type is known for being organized, pragmatic, and detail-oriented. They tend to be black and white thinkers, thrive in environments that are highly structured and routined, and prefer direct communication. They are also one of the most undervalued types, at least in the MBTI world. In the real world, they're doing just fine. If you look up the ISTJ on the internet, you'll probably get the image of them as some manager at a desk job who works a 9 to 5 every day, typing endless data into an Excel sheet, and, for some real excitement, maybe working on a stamp collection over the weekend. In brushing up on my knowledge of ISTJs, I ended up on Reddit and found this post on the ENFP subreddit about how ISTJs were their least favorite type. Not just like the type this individual got along with the least, they were arguing that ISTJ was objectively the worst type. They are opposite types, so I guess that could make sense for why they wouldn't always mesh super well, but still, that seems a little harsh. The reasons that were given in this argument were honestly just things like ISTJs are cold or boring, they do the same thing every day, they're too predictable, too worried about being organized. Basically, people were just calling the ISTJ boring and annoying. When you really look at the reasons that were cited, though, you see that these are all pretty great qualities to have. The reason they seem to be the official personality type of managers is because they're so good at it. They usually have great work ethics, are good at efficiency, and tend to do really well functioning within pre-existing systems. Things like schools, corporations, or just any organization with a clear structure where you start toward the bottom and work your way up will be right up the ISTJ's alley. The reason for this lies within the cognitive functions. If you aren't familiar with these, cognitive functions are basically just mental processes that your brain uses to gather information and make judgments. For a more in-depth explanation, you can check out this video here. So, the ISTJ's dominant function, the one they use first, is Introverted Sensing, or SI. SI is a perceiving function that focuses on absorbing and recalling sensory information and comparing what it sees to past experience. SI is often associated with memory. While that is partially true, it's more about cataloging and using your past experiences with the physical world to guide the way you understand and navigate the present. A good example of SI in use might be someone tasting a bowl of soup or some dish they used to eat in childhood and having a bunch of sensory details from when they used to eat that suddenly come to mind. They might remember the chair they would sit in or the way their childhood home smelled or something like that. SI is also really good at noticing differences in the environment. If you move a high SI user's stuff, for example, even just a little bit, they will notice. Extroverted thinking is the auxiliary function of the ISTJ. Being their second function, it is a strength of theirs, though slightly less so than their dominant function. TE is a judging function and is extroverted, so basically it's taking a system of logic and applying it to the external world. Being sensing types, ISTJs double down on using TE to organize and manage tangible real-world things. This could be anything from the previously mentioned Excel sheet data to schedules to their sock drawers. TE is a major part of what makes these types so logical and pragmatic as well. It isn't necessarily the same sort of logic you'd see from a TI type, like the INTP or ISTP, where you sit down and analyze all options for longer than it would take to just do the thing and move on. TE, especially for ISTJs, is more of a common sense logic. It does what works and moves on. Additionally, since ISTJs use TE so closely with SI, the two functions tend to work together to use the recalled information and common sense logic to do what worked last time. The ISTJ is not about to waste their time reinventing the wheel. This is where they tend to face some criticism for being too set in their ways, and that can be fair sometimes, but honestly, if we did try to reinvent the wheel every time we needed one, nothing would get done. The tertiary function of the ISTJ is introverted feeling. This isn't something you're going to notice immediately about the ISTJ, but once you get to know them, they'll let it show a bit more. Introverted feeling is a judging function that's focused on creating a system of values that guide your decisions. Introverted feeling, despite the name, isn't just an emotion, but rather one's gut feeling of what's right or wrong. Being introverted, and therefore subjective, the things FI decides to hold to as right can be fairly arbitrary. Since this is introverted, they will tend to process their emotions internally, but once you get close to them, a lot of ISTJs have a sort of soft side. ISTJs use FI as their moral compass to refer back to when TE or SI doesn't present a clear path forward. The ISTJ's inferior function is extroverted intuition, or NE. Being the last function, they aren't going to be using this one very often or very well. NE is a function of novelty and imagination. Being an extroverted perceiving function, it takes information and ideas and forms connections, branching out to new possibilities. Those things tend to make SI DOMs like ISTJs a little bit nervous. They'll usually take their coffee the same way they've been drinking it for the last 20 years, thank you, because there's nothing wrong with the way it is. Seriously though, when ISTJs do use NE, it's typically on some random kick of wanting a little excitement in their lives or having a burst of creativity. It's especially younger ISTJs that struggle with NE the most. One thing I've noticed with these types is, at least in American society, some functions are deemed more necessary, so to speak, than others. Where an INTP, for example, might be forced to get better at their inferior function, which is extroverted feeling, basically the people skills function, ISTJs don't really have to do that. They can usually get along just fine in the world without having any outlandish ideas. That being, I do think they can greatly improve their lives by embracing a little chaos and creativity every once in a while. One really good example of a well-developed, successful ISTJ is George Washington. He was known for being a stickler for the rules, whether those be actual laws or just rules of etiquette, but he was also a pretty revolutionary guy for sure, being the first president of the United States. He used his SI and NE together to recognize how things were done in the past, i.e. the monarchy, and see what wouldn't work for the new country. He used TE to lead the states in their most fragile years after the Revolutionary War and set up systems of government that have kept this experiment of democracy running for over 200 years. You really see George Washington's personality in his farewell address. I won't go over it all here because this video is about ISTJs, not George Washington, but the major thesis of the address was to stick to the system. If our country was going to stay afloat, it needed rules, and those rules had to be followed to a T. He argued against party politics, but stressed the importance of morality, religion, and education as the foundation for a free society. So ISTJs, thank you for being the backbone of our society. Without you, we might not have the laws necessary to run a country, or milk in the fridge. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please like and subscribe. Thanks.